Hello, everybody. It's James here. Story time with Dutch, and in lieu of me thinking of a protracted introduction because I'm just cutting them down shorter and shorter every time, let's throw it to the man, the myth, Dutch Mantell, and the cigar.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm like Henny Youngman. I never light the cigar. I just have it around and it's in my hand. Uh, I don't know if your listeners know this, but you send me a list of things we're going to talk about so I can prepare. And similar to a wrestling show, you have a format that's laid out. And one of your questions in there was about Naomi and Sasha walking out. And who was the guy in Japan that did what now?
Right, so I'll read out here. So we've had almost
Okay.
a spate of walkouts and bitterness between promoters. So Naomi and Sasha Banks walks out. We talked about in the last episode. Someone else, Kota Ibushi versus New Japan, some sort of misunderstanding that's led to a standoff between the wrestler and the company. But the big story is MJF no showing a fan fest before the big AEW Double or Nothing anyway, the big pay-per-view. I've already screwed up what the pay-per-view was. And then he turns up to the show, loses, etc. We'll get into the interview afterwards, but MJF as a performer and the whole situation, you know it.
Well, that's an interesting situation. I've often said that wrestling still has that aura of, is this real or is this not real? This is a prime example of that. And nothing really gets people more revved up. It's when they say, it's the work, they got all this. And I still believe it's a work, but they're going the long route with it. They're going to let it, and I think this is a situation where they're going to let MJF kind of cool off a while. Then, and he will remain lukewarm anyway. He's going to remain that. And so when they have the situation that's right for MJF to come back, all they got to do is spring him back, and he takes off like nothing has happened. And if it is a work, I do congratulate Tony Khan for doing this, because a lot of his booking is amateurish at times. But if they go the long route with this and let the people dictate what they want, when they finally get back to a spot where they can use MJF again, he'll be hotter than he ever was.
So, obviously, or I presume obviously, Naomi, Sasha Banks, when they walked out, that was not a work. What is sort of tipping you towards the MJF situation being a contrived situation?
Because it'd be perfect for it. I'm not saying it is, but it could be. I think money, I think he gives some of those guys some really good contracts in AEW. And they have been some bitching from the regulars at AEW that, hey, we're just going to be like TNA. We're going to just hire every WWE guy they let go. It's almost like AEW now is becoming a cast-off and just like a fishnet for all the WWE talent that they don't work at WWE anymore. About Sasha and Naomi, that's a different case. Did we talk about that last week or the last time we did it?
Yeah, I believe we talked about it last time, and we talked about wrestlers in general being disobedient, essentially.
Well, they're by nature disobedient. I mean, they're like spoiled kids. But let me tell you what ruins a bunch of wrestlers, especially the girls, because this is not say the case now because we just came off a pandemic. But if you're running those miles in WWE, you may fly to Chicago, then drive 200 miles to a town, and drive back to Chicago, then drive another 200 miles the next day. Those miles wear you out, and in those long car trips, you know what's working constantly? Yep, in here and running that mountain. And they're used to being stars. They're used to reading about themselves on all these dirt sheets. And they get to believing their own publicity or the publicity of somebody like a Dave Meltzer or an Apter, or I mean, not Apter, Alvarez or whoever. And they get to believing that. Then when they get to the dressing room, they're already drunk by the miles. And I mean, I don't think that the miles has a way of putting you into a manic personality, because you're nuts, you're crazy. Because not so much now, but years ago when we used to have territory days like Mid-South, you'd do 3,000 miles a week. Split that by 6 days, and you're doing 500 miles average every day. So you can't do that and maintain a sane mind and a sane thought process. But that's the life we inherited. That's the life we chose. So you take the good with the bad, and you go along. Now, Sasha and Naomi surprised me because they have guaranteed contracts making $2 million a year now. I don't know why they would walk out on that. Naomi is a little bit more protected than Sasha is because of her marriage, but who knows? But that surprised me, and that's the one I am actually more interested in than MJF.
Well, I'm sorry. My next question is going to be about MJF. It's more of a generality with MJF. You watch AEW Rampage for Sportskeeda. They don't pay me to plug this, but I do mention it quite a lot. And you've seen MJF talking. You've seen MJF in the ring. Do you believe? Some have compared him to like a modern-day Roddy Piper. Do you believe he's the man to lead AEW as the face of AEW in a year or two's time? Does he have it in him to do it?
I think he does have it in him to do it. I think more than maybe I can't even think of the guy's name now. CM Punk. I think he has more to lead it than CM Punk does. Now, CM Punk is 37, he's 38. And I don't think their schedule at AEW is as brutal as WWE's is or was. And MJF, how old is he?
Well, I was actually just looking at CM Punk, and CM Punk's 43. MJF is about 26 or 7 or something, maybe.
Okay, so if you were building a franchise, you're going to build it around youth because you want the young guys to be there in 10 years or 12 years or more. CM Punk, he wants to make the quick money and as much as he can. And the people, they love him. But I think if they did the right thing with MJF, I think he might make them forget CM Punk.
With Tony Khan, so MJF goes on to AEW Dynamite and he cuts in what is apparently modern parlance the pipe bomb promo against Tony Khan. And one of the things he calls him, and I'll just say the one word, is a mark. And people cheer. And I think it's worth mentioning that when you turn the company bad guy and the audience, WCW is the perfect example. How how dangerous a thing is this where you start rallying against the good guy promoter in real life, basically?
Well, that's why I'm saying, because he is basically now, the fans love him. Because they figure now, well, Tony Khan is giving these guys better contracts. MJF was here from the beginning. Isn't he due at least some of that money? Because now they're looking at it like Tony Khan's the heel. And MJF got screwed. That's why I'm saying when you bring him back, now they need an outlet for that. And he'd be the perfect outlet for it. I'm saying give him 3 months, give him 4 months until it all settles down and spring him back. I've seen it done 10 times.
Well, the most famous example is Steve Austin and Vince McMahon. Now, Steve Austin was never actually off TV, but he never wrestled due to a genuine neck injury. But how would you, let's say you are the booker of AEW, how would you book at least the first couple of months for maximum impact when he returns?
Well, first of all, you got to get something hot. You got to have your hottest angle, your hottest one, And that's what you bust him back in. Because not only does that make him seem bigger, it makes everybody in that feud seem bigger. It elevates everybody. It elevates the company. It elevates MJF, whoever's in it. It elevates Tony Khan. And then I'd have to see who I would have in there. But I think the first match, you don't really need a finish. You just need a wild fight all over the place. And then Tony Khan gets in the ring and he looks at MJF, and they can milk that crowd for almost 5 minutes. And finally, Tony said, come on, man, let's be friends. And MJF don't do it. And you don't even have to do it tonight, but I think that would be the time to do it. Then, when you bring them together, a good ending, and then you got something to come back with that match, and it would work.
Something I wrote down and you picked up on, and something I want to expand on slightly, is I interviewed Chris Harris a couple of months ago, and the reason why he left TNA was what you had alluded to, is that all the WWE guys, ex-WWE, were coming over to TNA and getting paid loads, whereas the TNA guys who've been there since the beginning were getting as little as something like $300 a TV taping. As somebody in charge, one of the head honchos, if you want to call someone who people would bend your ear over this kind of thing, who was complaining the loudest and who were the most egregious WWE hires for too much money?
I think Sting was the highest and most absurd number that I heard, because he didn't wrestle that much. He just wrestled on pay-per-views, but every time he showed up, it was $10,000 every time. Now, and they may have signed an actual total money agreement. I think it's like $500,000. Now you can see the bitching. Here's the guy making $50,000 and working every show they got. And here's Sting, because of his background, comes in and he works or not, he's going to still get $500,000, whether he takes a headlock or he just walks to the ring. And I can kind of see that bitching. And Chris Harris was one of them, because he wasn't the only one. AJ Styles was another one. And see, he had a chance to go to WWE before he went to TNA. But he turned it down because they really lowballed him. I mean, hell, he could have probably worked at McDonald's and made more. I think they offered him something like $500 a week, $600 a week or something, to move or to go to Orlando to their training developmental facility. And I don't know why they would want to send him to a developmental facility anyway. But he should have been training them. He was that good. Very seldom have I seen a guy, and AJ Styles is, you've heard of idiot savants. That had nothing to do with intelligence, but he just knew and understood wrestling from the get-go. You didn't have to tell him much, because he had a sponge for a brain, and he picked it up. And when you can have a guy that's only, and I probably ran across him, he'd probably been in the business maybe a year and a half, but that was just independent stuff. But his development in the ring was eons past that. I mean, if you looked at him, you said, man, this guy's, he's worked at least 10 years, but he hadn't. He'd only worked like a year and a half. So, but yeah, he was one of the complainers. But see, complaining to me didn't do nothing. Hell, I've heard this shit before. I mean, and I agreed with them. But hey, I had a job, so I had to go do the job. I couldn't take their bitches to management, because they're saying, what the hell? That's their job. And it was their job. So they all had to either get together. And that's the thing about the wrestling business, is because guys really don't stick together, because You know, if they go singly, they get fired. If they go as a group, they get fired or moved around. So I feel for him, but I think you talk about the guy who was one of the biggest paid in TNA was Sting. Kurt Angle was another one.
But at least he put the effort in the ring every single week, and he's not like Nash.
He did. And Nash was another one. Kevin didn't do much, and Booker T got a pretty good pop. But at least he would perform in the ring, and he'd do what you ask him to do, and he'd go and bust his ass. But the biggest one that I can say was Sting. That I think for what he did and what he got they didn't match up.
We'll move on then to the next piece of news. Cody Rhodes has got a pectoral tear. He still performs in the main event of Hell in a Cell. Apparently a fantastic match from all that I've heard. And I mentioned this to Don Morocco. Sorry, I recorded this morning with Don. And I asked him the same things like, of course this would have been let to be happened in the territory days because commissions would basically make sure that you had a pulse and were currently breathing, and that was about it.
Yep. Oh, commissions back in the day were horrible. They were just basically money collectors. That's what they were. And also back in the day, if Cody had that injury, he wouldn't get paid. He would just, if he didn't work that night, he didn't get paid. So I respect his commitment to his craft. And I didn't see the match, but I heard it was a hell of a match. For him to go out there with a tear like that, with a bruise like he had, is kind of, I don't know, I think he may have put himself in more danger. He actually jeopardized his career, basically. See, when you get a bruise like that, you can get an infection. And when that infection from that bruise, very hard to stop. And if you look at it, it's on, I think, the side, the right side of his body. But that's close to the heart. So anything that's close to the heart, you have to be very, very careful. And I hope he didn't do any more damage. But I will say one thing about Cody. Cody is old school. Grew up with a dad who was old school. I came along with Dusty. And he went out there and he said, guys, this is the way we used to do it.
I won't use the word overzealous, but when you were in WWE the second time, this was around the time that they were probably their most zealous as far as not letting people in the ring with, head injuries, retiring people with neck injuries, who would subsequently come back like Bryan Danielson and Edge and that kind of thing. What do you think would have happened in the mid-2010s when you were there if Cody turned up with that ripped-up pec?
Well, they'd probably give him the choice of whether you want to work or not. And I think at the time he probably had a guaranteed contract, so he would have been paid. I mean, but his contract then was nothing like I'm sure it is now. Because you know how I know he's making a lot of money?
Go on.
He's got his own bus. And when you get your own bus, that bus is not cheap, especially with gasoline prices like they are today. So, but I think they would give him the option of whether you want to work or not. And they could have done that here. I mean, because I think people seeing that bruise, I think they would have said, well, he can't work. He can't go. And they could have kind of delayed it. But Cody went out, and to his credit, he went out there and he busted his ass to get that match in. Because I think Cody and what's the guy
Seth
he wrestled?
Rollins.
Oh my God! I've been hit on the head a couple 100,000.
Seth Rollins.
They got chemistry, and I think they're going to continue to go back to that and go back to that. And I would think before the end of the year or before too long, they'll somehow be a team together. They have to be, because I think now, and people don't hate Seth. they kind of like him too. So if you team them up, but then comes the question, hey, where are we going to get these bad guys that the people are going to hate? See, that's the problem. See, on SmackDown, like you say, every Friday night I do a show for Chiquita. But what I've been preaching for the last year is SmackDown has no bench. Nothing. I mean, they got McIntyre, but who are they going to go against Roman Reigns after Brock Lesnar?
Well, supposedly they called an audible, supposedly on the pay-per-view on Sunday, and someone gave word to Bobby Lashley to grab a belt from a fan in the audience, one of those replica belts, and parade around it in the ring. Then the commentary team played it up like, well, setting him up to be the next challenger. And then when Roman defeats him, then who's next?
Yeah, but I just never thought Lashley had the magic. I mean, he's been there for, how long has he been there? 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, he started down in like 2006, was there for a few years, and left MMA and then TNA for a while, and he's been there another 4 or 5 years, probably easily.
Yeah. Great body. See, I don't follow Raw. That's just too much to ask. I just can't do it. But I watch SmackDown, and watching SmackDown, I sit there and I go, God, please. You can almost predict who's coming up next. And because they don't vary it very much. They have stopped the in rings with Roman so much because he's not there. But I mean, it's just, you can tell when they're going to break. You can tell this. I mean, it's too predictable. See, that's what I like about AEW. AEW, you really don't know what's going to happen. Anything could happen on that show, and you wouldn't be surprised. I mean, you'd enjoy it. But with SmackDown, when they do something different, you notice it right off the bat. But I do notice the lack of bench strength on heels and baby faces. Because, I don't know, it's like a baseball team. You know, if you got starting pitchers, they pitch every third game or fourth game. And then you got your pitchers that's not as good as the starter.
Yeah, the relief pitcher.
You have starting pitchers. I think you have 4 of those. I don't know. But then you have your relief pitchers. They only good for an inning or maybe 2 innings. Then they get blowed out. But WWE, they don't have, if you look at their bench, the only one they got, you'd have to really stretch your imagination to think, who is going to challenge Roman Reigns next? Well, you got McIntyre and but after that, what? You have, I don't know.
I'd like to pick up on something you said before then. You said Bobby Lashley never had the magic. Now, you were not with him in WWE, I don't think, but you were in TNA, or were you, in fact? When did he come into TNA?
Sometime
when
I was there.
Bobby Lashley never had the magic. What was obviously physically nothing. Just the interviews, just his manner, just the way he carried himself.
Well, I never felt the connection to the people, to the fans. The fans make stars. Let's take Dusty Rhodes. Dusty Rhodes didn't know a wristwatch from a wrist lock, but the fans loved him to death. Like handsome Jimmy Valiant. He couldn't wrestle his way out of a paper bag, but nobody cared because they liked Jimmy. They liked him because, hey, brother, hey, Big Daddy. And he danced to the ring, and that was his match. He'd dance to the ring for 2 minutes and then get in the ring and bump his knees together, and people going nuts. Then they start the match. The match go 2 minutes, and then and he danced his way out back to the other side, and that was his match. And the people were happy with that because they connected with Handsome Jimmy. They connected to Dusty Rhodes. They connected to Hulk Hogan or Roddy Piper or Steve Austin or The Rock. See, that's what I'm talking about. That chemistry there with Lashley, nothing with his body or his work. His connectability, I call it, to the fans is lacking. And he can't, I don't think he can make that up. That's why they put the manager with him to talk for him, because I think if he was trying to talk for himself, I think he'd do more harm than good. And I like Bobby, and I wish him a lot of success, but some guys have that magic and some guys don't.
Are you saying that a few weeks in Vince McMahon's promo class would would not sort that out?
No, it wouldn't. It's almost like you can either talk or you can't talk, period. I mean, that was AJ Styles' big drawback until somebody had the idea, let's give him let's coach him. Now he's not bad. He can kind of deliver a promo now. But before, and that's why they need writers, because writers can help these guys in this. But if you take a guy like Dusty, or you take a guy like Hart, they don't say nothing anyway. Or, Roddy, Piper, those guys can talk. So the best thing a writer can do then is get out of the way, because a writer gets in the way. And you can you imagine a writer going up to Stone Cold and said, "Here's your interview." Get the hell out of here. And he just stunned him right there. You can't do that, because he got over on his own. And I guess they gave him a few, I don't know, tidbits to hit. Say this and this and this. But the rest of it was all Stone Cold. Now, see, that's magic. And let me give you the prime example of magic was Vince McMahon and Steve Austin. You saw at WrestleMania, they just got in the ring together, and here come the people. That's 20 years later, and it still hasn't died, because they just had magic. And Vince played his role perfect. Austin played his role perfect, and the people bought it, and they made a ton of money off that. And you can't manufacture that. You can't make it. You can't manufacture it. That's why I call it magic, because magic happens. And when you have that magic and it comes to you in a bottle like that, it can easily evaporate, but they didn't let it evaporate. They made strong use of it. And and that surprised me, because I knew when they come face to face, if they did, the place was going to erupt.
When you went back to WWE in 2013, I think, and obviously a lot of things are going to have changed from the last time you were there, did somebody try and hand you a script, and did they force you to read it verbatim or near enough?
Well, they handed me a script. But these are guys, when I started wrestling, they weren't even born yet. And they didn't do any research on me, because that's frowned upon, I think, in WWE, because they don't want older guys like me or veterans like me. They don't want them talking to the writers. Because I read one time, Vince doesn't want writers who have wrestling knowledge for some reason. So this writer gave me this interview. He said, "Here's your interview." And I read it, and I said, "Brother, this sucks. This is the living shit. So what's wrong with it?" I said, "Well, for starters, everything. It doesn't make sense." I said, "Zeb wouldn't say this stuff." And I said, "Let me ask you something." And I may have told you this before. Sometimes I repeat myself. I said, "Where did you work before?" And he said, "Oh, the Utica Times Press, Gazette, Journal, Daily, something." I said, "Brother, I just got to tell you that a reporter for the Utica Gazette, Daily, Journal does not a wrestling writer make." I said, "Change this and this and this." "Well, we got to run it by Vince." I said, "Run it by him." Because they would give me and this is where experience and being in the business a long time works for you. I never delivered those promos like as they were written, because that's what they wanted you to do. I didn't do that. I'd read it one time, and I got it. And then the writer would be getting nervous. He said, "You got that interview?" "I got it." About 10 minutes later, "You got that interview?" I said, God damn, how many times I got to tell you, you deaf or what? I got it. Do you want to do it for me back here? I said, no, I don't want to do it for you. I'm not doing it. I said, I'll do it in the ring. Leave me alone. So I'd go to the ring, and now there have been times I actually forgot it. And then I just make up something, but Vince never said anything to me. He'd say, good interview. And then I'd just walk by. That's what he would do.
There was I think Steve Austin maybe has probably said this a million times. Other people who were big stars in the 90s have said this, is Vince wants to see you take a chance out there. And that sounds to me like a big pile of crap, because if somebody took a chance and went off script and did whatever they did, unless they were the biggest star in the company, I would feel that they would get fired straight away.
Well, it's according to what kind of chance they took. Because I think if he didn't believe that you knew what you were doing, that's a risky undertaking. It is. But if you're in the business like I've been in forever, and, you know, Austin had already proved his worth, and, you know, some of those guys can do that. But like you said, they're money makers. They make those dollar signs roll. But if you take just a regular guy going out there and he's going to do it, nah, he would grab him, and he may fire him coming back through the door. I've seen him do that. One guy went out one night and he said something like, he called the fans, you're a bunch of lazy pricks or something. Oh my God. He was fired before he got back.
Brad Maddox, I believe that was.
Yep. I was there. I was sitting right beside Vince. Tell him to go home and not to come back.
Oh, you've got to elaborate slightly. So you were in guerrilla position when all this happened.
Oh yeah, I was up. There was going to be another match. See, they want you up there. Say you got a match before you. They want you, when that match is in the ring, they want you standing by. They don't want to go looking for you when it's time, because, you know, in a building, it's big. You could be anywhere. So they want you on deck. And I can see that. They want you on deck. So me and Swagger were there, and whoever we were working with, and we're sitting there. And I'm sitting here, and Vince is probably two people down. There was nobody in the seat next to me. And Vince is down there he's looking at a monitor. And this was the start of the night. So Brad Maddox went out there, and they told him to do, you know, he's a pretty decent talker. And he went down there, and when he called them a bunch of pricks, Vince just said, what? He just hit the ceiling. I mean, you can say a lot of, it's according to who said it, but Brad Maddox said it, and they didn't like it, so he fired him on the spot. And he was fired before he got back from the ring. So one of the agents took him, and he assigned an agent and said, go tell him to get his bag and go home. So, and I never saw him again.
There you go. That's taking a chance for you when you're not a main event star, or saying the wrong thing slightly.
Well, I think it was it just caught Vince the wrong way. And you don't need to say that in house shows anyway, especially on TV nights, because a lot of people got their kids there. Of course, a lot of kids come to that anyway. So you could probably call them assholes more than you could call them pricks. And I think it was the word he used. I don't know. It's Vince, so you go figure.
We've got a few more bits and bobs of news, because it's been like a month. For people who don't know, we're going to be doing this more often now. So as a weekly event, thankfully. And I mentioned CM Punk won the AEW Championship, or did I? I didn't. We mentioned CM Punk, but you don't think... Well, from what you've seen, CM Punk and his performance since returning.
Well, his performance is good. I saw they have a thing on I guess YouTube or Twitter or something. It's called AEW. It's missed moves, is what it is, and they bring something out. AEW is Punk's trying to do something. He messes up once, twice, misses something else. But the thing with Punk, this is what I disagreed with them on, is he's hurt and he's not going to defend his title, but they're going to have a tournament for the interim champion. I went, wait a minute. They said, oh, what shoot organization does that?
UFC interim title they're coming up with.
Well, it's kind of stupid. They can do what they want to do. But, I think, they used to have a rule, and nobody remembers this, is you got to defend your title every 30 days. Now, that's an old rule. But I've heard it ever since I started wrestling, but then they got away from it. So if he's not better and he has to give it up, that's an angle in itself. So don't write more angles if you don't have to write them. I would have him go out there, and he's not going to defend because he's had surgery and people feeling sorry for him anyway. And then I would have him try to give it to Hangman Page again. And Page turns it down and said, I don't want it if you just give it to me. I don't want it like that. Then it goes to a tournament. Now you might have something. Then he comes back because Page wants a shot at it. CM Punk wants a shot at it. So now there's another angle there. I mean, let these angles build on their own instead of trying to write them yourself. Wait on them. I think Tony understands that one.
With CM Punk, you were also with the company when he left. Speaking of everybody walking out, CM Punk walking out 2014, you were with the company at the time. Were you backstage that day, and cast your mind back, and do you remember what was said and what you heard at the time?
I remember it very well. I think we were in Cleveland, and I kept wanting to see Vince. And very seldom do I really want to see Vince, but I had this idea that I wanted to run by him. And 7 o'clock, he's busy. Okay. 7:15, he's busy. I'm outside the office waiting. There's like 3 or 4 other guys there too. Because Vince encourages that. Come and tell me this story. Let's see what we can. And sometimes the story will, catapult his brain into the same line of thinking. But I couldn't get in. 8 o'clock, show started. Still can't get in. The show's going on. So, but who was in there was CM Punk was in there all night long. Then I heard the story later on. He had quit and he'd walked out. But it took him all that time. I guess they was trying to talk him out of it, or let's see what we can do. But I do remember that.
Do you remember the thing that was said to Triple H at the time? Something to the effect of Triple H said that they could work together, and then CM Punk said, with all due respect, you're the one who needs to work with me to get over rather than the other way. One thought the other needed them more, basically.
Well, vaguely I remember that. Also remember that when you work with Vince, I don't give a shit who you are. You can know too much for your own good. So if you try to go to them and say, well, this sucks, this is the way I think I would do it, especially talking about yourself, that didn't get over too well. That's like going to the head coach and saying, coach, that last set of plays sucked. So I think I should call the next set of plays on the next time meeting. That's not going to get over it. But if you got to make them think, and I told Jack Swagger this. I said, guys, I would tell him, Jack, if you want them to buy an angle, go in there and say, look, Vince, I got this hell of an idea, but I want you to think about it. So you give it to Vince. And then as you give it to him in bits and pieces, then you can see if his brain starts turning a little bit. What you're doing is you're selling your idea to him, but in the process, you're making him think that it's his idea. So he's more apt to pop on his own idea than he is to pop on your own. Another thing with these agents, you couldn't give them any ideas because if it was kind of a complicated, detailed plan, especially these guys who go to the Utica Gazette Journal people, those writers, because you could give him a great idea, but he couldn't go to Vince and sell the idea. Excuse me. He couldn't sell the idea because he didn't understand it in the first place. So if Vince asked him to defend it, he couldn't defend it because he don't even know what he's talking about from the beginning. That's why the talent had to go. Because at least if the writer was in there with Vince, they were speaking different languages. If the talent's in there with Vince, they're kind of on the same page.
I take it that you were never approached, or maybe you were and you turned it down, to become an agent with WWE, or I suppose in the sense maybe you were in TNA to a point where people would ask your advice, but in WWE, have you never been asked to do that?
I've been asked and I turned it down because I have a pet peeve of mine is getting cussed out about every 15 minutes. I never softened to that approach much, you know. And Vince, he's so volatile. He goes, God damn, he throws stuff. I mean, but I just never could operate in an environment like that. And give me some ideas. I'll give you some ideas. But if I give you an idea, don't just throw your hands up in the air and say it's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. Because I've even heard Vince say, the worst idea is the one that's not pitched. So pitch it. But sometimes a lot of them are afraid to even pitch anything because they're fearful of Vince's reaction to it. And he's like a volcano. He could be sitting there and all of a sudden he goes off. I've seen him a couple of times, not that many, but I've heard some stories of creative session. He'd get them up at 3:00 in the morning on the road. They got in at 1, and he'd call them to his room at 3, and they'd rewrite the show. Can you imagine that? Mm. That's why they're half nuts. And that's why but the talent's not getting up 3:00 in the morning. The creative is. That's why I've always said creative is the most neglected and overlooked part of a wrestling organization, because when it's doing great, the talent is tremendous. But when it's doing the craps, you could have the same talent, but creative's terrible. Creative's terrible. And I don't know how creative gets paid on sellouts. I don't know if they get bonused or if they get kicked extra money. I never heard of it, but I hope they do, because some of their ideas aren't bad. Most of them are.
With Vince McMahon and his volatile temper, what would wind him up more than anything else? A bad idea, someone turning up late, someone smoking, someone sneezing in a meeting? I've heard many. Well,
it's according to his mood. According to his mood at that particular moment. He could come in, and this is how I used to check the temperature of the room. I would get to TV, I'd get to, 2:00, 2:30, me and Jack, and we'd walk in. The first place I would check, I'd walk by the writer's room. And I've told you this. You would check the temperature of the writers. If they're in there like this, do-dee-dee-da-da, everything's fine, because Vince is not mad. If you walk in there and they're like this, they're eating nails, Vince is chewing their asses out from go to woe. And a lot of those days, you should get your final instructions on what you're going to do that night. From 2 to 4, you'll get who you're working with. But sometimes if you don't get it to 4, they've rewritten the whole show. Sometimes at 5:30, you still don't know. And they're still writing. And I have seen them. This is one time this happened. I forgot where it was. They were still writing the show when the first match was in the ring. They hadn't completed the show. So, and of course, it's all depends on Vince's mood and how he feels that day. So, and I felt sorry. And that's why I didn't take a creative job. I also didn't want to take an agent job either. I just didn't want to do it. Because I didn't need to deal with it at that point in my career. Listen, this is what I wanted to do. I want to show up to the building, put my little tie and shirt on, put my vest on, go out there with Jack, who was going to have a match, and I'd do an interview, and that's what I wanted to do. And I wanted to leave and pack my bag, get in the car, and go to the next town. But see, if I was an agent, guess what? I was be there to the last match and beyond. And then you might have had a meeting. Then they said, okay, we're not going to have the meeting here. We're going to have it in the hotel when we get to the town. Well, see, that's your whole night. And that's where your insanity on the road sets in. And I had something I was going to say about Naomi and Sasha. That's when I was doing this. That's what happened to them. Too much road time, too much mouth. And I think they got to talking and they talked themselves into it.
And I think,
but anyway, that's it. I didn't want to be an agent. No.
Well, I suppose I'll say this and I'll move on to the last 3 points of news we've got is you've also got these days, you've also got a lot of people on social media telling you you're great or terrible, and there's a lot of opinions that you're absorbing every single day, and that will surely change your outlook on life, even if no matter how warped it gets, basically.
You're talking about being a talent?
Yeah, especially because you're under the microscope more than ever, and people can access you to tell them, for them to tell you your opinion constantly.
Well, that's part of the world you live in. So you either take it or you don't take it. But people don't take well to criticism. Most people don't. But the ones getting criticized, they don't know how to fix it. That's the problem. They're getting criticized by a fan for what? But yet the fan offers no remedy.
Solution,
yeah, they don't offer a remedy for the criticism that he's dispensing. So if you're going to pay attention to that, I highly advise you not to do it, because there's no winner in that. And I've seen some guys that are so, I guess, sensitive about the character or what they're doing. They can't take that. They can't take any criticism at all, because it just, what self-confidence they have sometimes evaporates when they get ratioed on social media. It just kills them.
Do you think what percentage of current pro wrestlers do you think take the match ratings of, let's say, a Dave Meltzer too seriously?
I had to sneeze. I think Dave Meltzer takes it too seriously, to tell you the truth.
You're allergic to the name Dave Meltzer, I can tell.
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm allergic to. Dave Meltzer can kiss my ass. He really can. But I will say one thing, he's a smart guy. You know, he blocked me on Twitter because he loves to talk about how campy Tennessee was. Well, I made a lot of money in Tennessee with a lot of great stuff. But he wasn't talking about the Memphis end. He was talking about the middle of the state, which was run by another promoter, and he was just a carny promoter. So when I engaged him to back up what he said, he refused to even defend what he said and just blocked me. So, but Dave Meltzer was smart at the time, because he was just some kid, I guess, in California, who wrote this letter and sold it for $2 a month. He used to actually do the paper copies of it, and he'd mail it out every week. So if he had 1,000 copies he was going to mail out at $2 a piece, well, that'd be about $2,000. He'd make $1,500 a month and never leave his house. This was back in 1978. So you imagine $1,500 then compared to what it would do. It was like $5,000 a week. So, and through all these fans, he built this reputation of, oh, he knows wrestling and he knows that. And a lot of times he just makes stuff up. He said, oh, no, I would research it. I'm asking him for it. He would research it with people who agreed with him. Of course, they're going to agree with him. But if you're going to believe that stuff, now the internet's kind of blown it open. Now you can anybody can put anything on the internet, which Dave Meltzer was doing 20 years ago. What I'm saying, he was ahead of the curve, but I don't believe a word comes out of his mouth.
We'll move on to a few more bits of news, and then Stephanie McMahon has left WWE, supposedly temporary, although there is a recent Business Insider article claiming that she was more shoved than she would like to admit. She's not said anything about it whatsoever publicly yet, but apparently there are issues with her being not good enough drawing in or generating sponsorship.
I read substandard. I don't know what they base that on.
Well, I'll tell you exactly, actually. WWE were hoping to get about $100 million of sponsorship. In the first quarter of this year, I believe WWE generated, or maybe the last quarter of last year, 20 million. So 20 million shy of the annual total.
$20 million shy of the yearly total?
Yeah, of what they were hoping for 100 million in the year.
This is what I think is happening. I think you've seen Triple H. He's back to work now, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But he doesn't have any of the power that he had before, correct?
I don't know that. I'll defer to you on that.
I don't think he does. And Stephanie doesn't have the power. So not only are you talking about the creative side, you're talking about the corporate side. This is what I think is happening. WWE is worth about $5 billion. So what I think we're seeing is the early stages of the Mcmahon exit out of WWE as a hands-on ingredient, I guess, as a hands-on part of it. And I think in 5 years, I think maybe the McMahons will put their stocks up for sale or not. But I think in 5 years, I think Vince will be kind of out and Triple H may be on the fringes, and I think Stephanie will be out. That's what I think, because that's what it looks like to me. This new guy, Khan, is running it almost like his bottom line. And the reason I say this is you watch SmackDown, they use the same people over and over and over again. And they got that, I mean, to find wrestlers to put on TV, they're not hard. AEW finds them all over the place. So if they're trying to save money on, and I can't believe that on SmackDown, they would be better off going and using some local talent somewhere and bringing them in one time and get rid of them than they're probably doing now. But I think the exit, and I'm not basing this on anything about the McMahons. It's just a feeling I have that we're probably seeing the early stages of the McMahon withdrawal from WWE.
So who do you think it goes to then? Do you think it would be a major conglomerate, obviously, but Disney, Viacom, I've heard several.
Well, I don't know who it's going to go to. Could go to Peacock, I guess. I don't know. But they live by the corporate sword all these years, and I think it's going to be just another conglomerate with just faces, just nameless faces in different places. And I think, what's that guy's name? Nick Khan?
Nick Khan, yeah.
Where did he come from?
I don't know. He was hired quite recently. I think in 2020, he replaced George Barrios and Michelle something or other. And he seems to know what he's doing more than most, I suppose, in the office.
Well, he might know about business, corporate business. The only thing Vince that he added so much was he understood creative. And he understood when he had good creative. But I think now that he is I think Vince is detached from the finished product so much. And I think they have so many pay-per-views and so many TV shows. And it's very easy for a small detail to get overlooked. AEW, of course, has a much lower number of TV tapings and pay-per-views. So I think that's why their pay-per-views are better than WWE's. And I think people look forward to them more than they look forward to WWE, maybe except for, WrestleMania, maybe SummerSlam. But back to my statement, I think this is 2022. Mm-hmm. I think in 2025, I think the outlook will be, even in 3 years, I think it'll be totally different. And then in 2025, you come back and say, Dutch, you lying son of a bitch. And nothing's changed. It's still the same stuff. Here's Vince on a walker. He's still going in there. But I think they know what they're doing. Whether it'll work, I don't know.
We'll go for a few. I knew we wouldn't get to the main bit of the podcast, which has taken up a page and a half almost. I knew we wouldn't even get to it. We had so much news. So we'll go through the rest of the news and we will call it a day then. Michael Cole recently celebrated 25 years with WWE, the poor man.
Well, good for him if he can do that. I would rather take, I'd rather walk through a beehive with my shirt off and to listen to Michael Cole call him because he's so corporate. I mean, you don't get everything, and you see him even when they come back to him. He's reading off something that they want to get in. So there's without Pat McAfee there, it wouldn't even be worth listening to. McAfee at least has some clever gems that he can get in that you remember. Cole doesn't, and I think Cole at this point, he knows what he can do and what he can't do. He's a company guy. So he said, do it like this, and he's done it like that. It doesn't make the broadcast any better, though.
The last time that Michael Cole was not in Vince McMahon's ear, Vince McMahon was not in his ear while doing commentary, it was for some NXT UK event on the network. And supposedly, he was completely different, and he was far better. So it's not like he can't do it. He just knows what Vince likes, and that's why he's still there after 25 years, it seems.
Because Vince is in his ear. Okay, this is Vince. You're out there. Okay, well, God damn it, say this about the damn shirt sale or whatever. Oh, yeah, it's a big shirt deal going on, blah, blah, blah. And Vince is feeding him the lines, and all he's doing is just saying what Vince wants him to say, which doesn't give him free reign of doing of good commentary. I remember I told you this one time, and you're familiar with it. I was watching a British wrestling show, and I'm watching it, and I says, what is wrong with me? I'm kind of liking this. I've seen like 10,000 matches, but this was for the corporate atmosphere hits. The announcer was actually talking about the match and the strategy involved behind this match, because he knew how a certain guy worked, how another guy worked, and he's trying to mesh that into an idea of what's going to work for each guy. And it actually a very, very wise decision. It made you watch the match more. And he didn't overtalk the moves. He talked you through it. See, like Michael go, oh, he punches him. Well, hell, I can see he punched him. You don't got to tell me right after he did it. I saw it with you, Michael. So, but I don't know. I may be wrong on that, but I was enjoying and I like British wrestling, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, Ken Walton, he did the commentary on his own for decades. So and he was an amazing commentator. And as you say, he just nice and easygoing, nice and warm and welcoming, full of personality, and he didn't have to interrupt every second's worth of silence with his own voice, which I think it's like silence is worth more than just saying words for the sake of raising the decibel level.
Well, he made you feel the match. And British wrestling, it would go 10 minutes, sometimes 12 minutes, and they wouldn't break in every 3 minutes for a commercial or to run something across the bottom. That was before those days. And when did that end in British wrestling?
1988.
That was a bad year, wasn't it?
Yeah.
What did the wrestling fans say?
The amazing thing about British wrestling is that when it went off TV for a few years, attendance went up because so many people were missing British wrestling. I won't bore you to death with it, but in '86 there was a new commissioner of ITV. He hated wrestling. He put it in a less advantageous time slot. The viewership halved, and then when the viewership halved after a couple of years, he had the excuse to get rid of it for good.
Mm.
And just low class, and couldn't sell the advertisers, and they were looking at the bottom line like so many corporate types do.
Well, it was low class because that's what they thought of it.
Mm-hmm.
But now look at WWE, it's the same stuff. I mean, totally different product. But look at what they're doing now. They're doing hundreds of millions of dollars of advertising. But if Stephanie had done more, like you said, she'd still been there.
Right, so I'll give you two bits. Oh, actually, just before I do, Michael Cole as a person. You did the Cole and Bradshaw YouTube shows years ago. How was Cole as a person just hang around with? Did you spend much time with him?
He's a little temperamental. He really is. I mean, if you would kid around with him, you know, he would take it personal more than, you know, just one of the boys. John kind of liked him, but only because he had to get along with him. Otherwise, John would have clotheslined him and left him laying. But see, Cole had been there all these years. He knew all where the bodies were buried. He knew all that stuff. And he might as well be part of the family now. And this is what I'm saying, when the McMahon, if they aren't making an exit, all the McMahon allies all these years, they're in jeopardy too. So you may see a bit of nervousness coming out of Stanford.
Two more bits of news, then we'll wrap it up. Melanie Pillman died. We don't know the circumstances, but she passed away. Obviously, Brian died in 1997. Quite well known. The only time I think we really, as fans, saw Melanie was the day after Brian died, and Vince McMahon thought it was a great idea to shove her on live TV to interview her about it.
I missed that for some reason. I never saw that. What year did Brian die?
It was October 97.
Hell, I can't even tell you where I was in October 97.
Either USWA or Puerto Rico, I would have gathered.
Well, I don't know where I was.
If that USWA was shut by then, so God knows.
He put her on TV.
Yep, live.
Vince did.
Oh yeah, and also he teased it throughout the show and then interviewed her in the second hour and say, "Don't go away. We're going to interview live a grieving widow with no tears left in her body to talk about, I don't know."
Bad taste, I think. Bad taste. You're taking advantage of a woman who doesn't want to be taken advantage. Her husband has just died. So I think that, I don't know whose idea that was. I would have never okayed that idea because that's in bad taste. And that's something that won't go away. She'll remember that forever, and all Brian's friends will remember it forever. He shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
Didn't he interview Jeff Jarrett live right after Owen Hart? You remember that?
Owen Hart fell to the ground. He was wheelchaired past Jeff just before he was about to do an interview. They hadn't known it was fatal yet. So I think they were still doing CPR on the gurney as they were wheeling him past Jeff. And then they said, "Right, Jeff, you're on 3, 2, go."
Mm-hmm. Well, that is one of those things that's live TV for you. Sometimes you don't have time to plan for that. That's not as bad as hyping that a man's widow who just died the day before, we're going to talk to her. That's not as bad because they have planned that. The thing with Owen, of course, not planned, and whatever happens, happens. So that's some of the tragedies that sometimes people lose track of, but people lose their lives. And these are things fans don't forget this stuff. So I hate it happened. And I remember Jeff, when he was doing the interview, he was crying because Owen was his friend. They traveled together. They teamed together. And I heard more Owen Hart stories from Jeff, and they were hysterical, except the last one, and that wasn't too funny.
No. Speaking of Jeff, we will close the podcast on this. And Jeff has made an appearance on the Broken Skull Sessions with Steve Austin. Now, they've already spoken together publicly a few years ago. Jeff was on Austin's podcast. But yet again, they had to come out and sort of dispel a rumor that they really hated each other for decades, or Austin hated Jeff for a comment that Jeff made about a paycheck in USWA. Now, I think you were in USWA at the time. What did you know about the comments, the situation, and are they downplaying what was once a heated situation?
Heavily downplaying it. Austin wanted to kill it because nobody was making any money. And if Austin said he wasn't making any money and Jeff walked by, Jeff didn't mean anything by it, but he took it wrong. But Steve has a long memory, and he never forgot that. And when they got to WWF in those days, he didn't forget it then. And the reason that he turned down working with Jeff is because Austin, and this is a shoot, Austin didn't think he was worthy of having to wrestle Jeff because he thought it actually hurt him. See, if you had Jeff here and Austin here, Austin was up here and Jeff was here. So who would be taking the downward lunge? And he didn't want to do that. And Jeff would be moving up. It would help Jeff more than it would help Austin because Austin, all he could do, he could actually lose ground on it. And that's why he didn't want to do it. So if they're telling you that it was downplayed, I think they're saying that, and I think they have made amends on it. But during the time that it was going on, it was pretty real. For
people who don't know, could you explain the situation? I alluded to it. I left out a lot of it so you could say it. But from your memory, what happened? What was the whole situation?
When he said that, well, I guess they get their paychecks, I guess.
Yeah. And what did he say, of course, as well? And
I think he was looking at it. Business was terrible. It was, I don't know why they were even keeping the territory running, because Lawler wasn't even working the territory. Lawler was spending most of his time in Stanford on Monday nights and going on tour or coming back to Memphis and doing other stuff. But he wasn't spending all that time on wrestling. Nobody was making any money. Jarrett wasn't making any money. Jerry Lawler, and these were the owners. They weren't making any money. And of course, the talent wasn't making any money because nothing was drawing. I mean, WWF was kicking everybody's butts. So I think they get their checks on a Wednesday, I think. And when he opened up his pay stub, it says this. And so Jeff walked by and he said, I don't care how long you look at it, the number's not going to change. Oh my God. And Jeff, I mean, Steve's like a fuse anyway. If you just put a little light there, he'd blow up. So, but he remembered that. He didn't make a big scene then, but he remembered that. And I think later, I think from that point, Steve went back to Texas for a while. And the next time I heard he was in WWF. And I was in WWF and he come in as what did he come in as first?
The ringmaster.
Oh, horrible. That was horrible. And then he finally found out what he wanted to do. And when he hit that 316 promo, which he came up with, and he took off. But he never forgot what Jeff had said. And when it come time, and Jeff had left a couple of times too, he'd had his problems with Vince and held him up and done all kind of stuff. But I don't think Steve ever forgot it. And I think that they say it was overblown. I don't think it was.
And Austin mentioned this to you at the time, did he? Or was this?
No, I was there.
Yeah. Oh, you were in the locker room at the time.
No, I was riding with Steve every day. You know, he brought it up. And I said, oh, he didn't mean nothing by it. He said, you know, and he was kind of pissed about it. But he's the one that holds the long grudges. And he must have held it all the way to WWF.
And he's the one who was the biggest star.
So when it come time, because he didn't figure Jeff was an ally, I don't think. Because Jeff was the promoter's son. But Jeff wouldn't get treated special either. He was starving to death too. But Steve didn't look at it that way, that his daddy's running the company. And he thought they had to be making some money because he wasn't making nothing. So he got a job doing something else while he was wrestling there. And I think he went to the store one day and got him some crackers and some, I don't know, cheese or some hot dogs. And that's what he lived on for about a week. So he didn't get in this bit. I mean, he really struggled big time to make it in this business. And I'm glad he is where he is.
And I think that's a great example of paying your dues. But for now, it's been possibly the best one we've ever done. Who can say? It's up to everybody else who listens to it to give us their opinion. But for now, thank you very much for watching. We'll catch you again next week. And thank you, Dutch, for entertaining us.
Thank you. We the people.